come to train together and develop a good friendship, which is then where we've developed a lot of these discussions we'll have today. And so the first thing we're going to discuss after giving you insight into our lives is the idea that change, even when it's inherently a very good thing, really does come with some very difficult aspects to it, and how to deal with achieving your goals essentially, and how to deal with the changes and baggage that comes with that in some ways. And then our discussion will then move towards dealing with the inner chaos and the inner world that can, the inner world changes of the mind that need to happen really to progress towards where you want to be in life or achieving your goals, which for us is obviously running, but can be anything. And then lastly, we'll just be discussing our high pressure environments and some little mental strategies and things we use to actually get through our day-to-day training and not get in our own way in races and competition. And the Q&A time, we'll see how we go. Might be our optimistic and ambitious thinking there, but we will have our contact details on the last page for you guys to contact us if need be.
And we're also conscious that we're elite athletes talking about elite sport, and this is a professional career, you know, kind of, we're all from different industries, but also noting that, you know, that pursuit of excellence, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, is quite a universal experience that you can apply across all kinds of different industries. So yeah, not just sport.
Yeah, for sure. And so to start with, to tell you a little bit about ourselves, Trina, how has your life journey and everything that you've been through shaped who you are today and how you deal with everything that comes with being an elite athlete?
Yeah, it's a very short story of my life. I started running when I was 6 years old, doing little athletics in Canberra where I grew up, and I was quite a successful schoolgirl athlete, so primary school and high school. But then I gave up the sport for a very long time because I was having a lot of trouble with an eating disorder and dealing with the high pressure environment of being a very young child, young, you know, growing body, and dealing with being a runner. So then I started focusing more on my studies and pursued architecture, and now I'm studying my master's here at Melbourne Uni. And then when I was about 22, so around 4 years ago, I decided to pick up running again as a way of, you know, helping my mental health and my general health. And then, you know, turned out I didn't lose much of that talent that I had as a little girl, and ended up having my breakout season in 2019 and winning the Australian Championships, and going overseas to win the university games, and then breaking the Australian record. And now I'm qualified for the Olympics, and that's my current goal, if, you know, fingers crossed, everything goes to plan.
Sweet. To then give a bit of the background on, I suppose, in some ways similar journey. I most definitely was not a runner growing up. I was into all ball sports and those sorts of things. And then at a similar time that Trina went through a lot of difficulties in life, I had my own journey with very severe mental health problems. So I went from essentially dealing with life through binge eating and addiction to alcohol at 18 to then being severely anorexic by the time I was 19. And I suppose the journey from there, well, there was a lot of change involved, for sure, but I spent about 3 or 4 years, I don't remember much of it, but I was in and out of different mental institutions for a good chunk of that time. So I've spent all up about 18 months of my life living in different psychiatric institutions. And as part of trying to get my life back, I suppose, I found running at some point along the journey, and I was about 20 years old when I first started running. But then in 2015 and 2016, I was just a recreational runner at the back or the middle of the pack, just rocking up to races, doing my thing. I ran a couple of marathons, and then lo and behold, found myself a coach that essentially changed my life in many, many ways. And I went from a recreational runner and did a season of cross country, but then found myself running a mountain race, and the first mountain race I ever ran, I won, and I also picked up a professional sponsorship in the very first race. So I'll talk a bit about that later in terms of the changes that I went through in that stage. But I certainly wouldn't have picked myself to be where I am today, because since then I've won the Australian mountain running national championships twice, represented the country twice. I've run a couple of ultra marathons. That's always fun too, to put in there. But yeah, definitely a interesting journey, and a long journey. So that's just a little bit of a tidbit of background from both of us. But it's fair to say both of us have dealt with a lot of change and huge amounts of shifts that have had to happen along the way. And so we thought that this quote here was an apt way to start our discussion, because it highlights the fact that even the most positive changes in life, so for both of us achieving incredible goals that we never really thought we would, they still come with some level of pain. And at a certain level, we can all relate to this, because the transition when you finish any sort of study, high school, uni, anything like that, or you get the job of your dreams, there is always that element of fear and unknown attached to that can be really hard to deal with, and in some ways almost stops people trying to achieve their goals in the first place at times. So Trina, at the more extreme level, I know that you obviously experienced some very quick changes. So how did your experience of becoming the Australian 800 metre record holder within months, literally, of breaking onto the 800 metre scene just in our own state, how did that affect you?
Yeah, it was a very overwhelming sort of 6 months, the kind of progress that I made. The progress I made in around 4 months would usually take around, 5 to 10 years in other circumstances if I did things the correct way. I remember having a very intense experience after I had won the Australian University Games up in Sydney, and I'd broken 2 minutes for the first time, which is a pretty significant barrier for my event. And it was the first time that someone had broken it in about a decade. I really broke down afterwards, even though it was objectively an extremely great experience, and a very positive thing for my running. But at the time, I just felt very overwhelmed that, running for me had always been this sort of self-medication in a lot of ways, and a way for me to find routine and community and all these really great things to help my mental health. And then suddenly it became now it became something where I was running for Australia. Now that I had this talent, I was going to be expected to run overseas, and I was this new special thing coming through. And I felt at that moment that even though there was this positive thing, there was I was grieving a lot of my my relationship to the sport and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a very sort of intense experience in both ways, and also that unexpectedness of it as well. I hadn't had those years to prepare myself, embrace myself for such a huge change.
For sure. And with that being your experience, because I know this is something I struggled with myself, how did you cope with all the external changes such as sponsorships and expectations from people, and the way people treated you in the immediate aftermath?
Yeah, I guess it's taken me about 12 months to really decide that I want to pursue athletics, and a lot of that was because of that circus that comes with professional sport. And but a lot of that, not getting distracted around those sorts of things, was around having a really great team around me, having really working with my sports psychologist around my personal values and who I am as an athlete. And also realizing, one of my biggest goals in life is, mental health advocacy and helping other people, and, pursuing, besides all the amazing things of traveling the world and all this sort of stuff, I will be given a platform as a professional athlete to share my story and really impact people's lives, and opportunities like this, like talking to everyone here today.
For sure. And yeah.
So. Well, I'll
yeah, you take the reins.
Now. So we talked a bit around these external changes and dealing with external changes, and then talking about this internal chaos that comes with change. And yeah, so Simone, I know you've had an interesting journey with entering the elite level of sport, and so how have you dealt with that identity shift, and you know how other people treat you and how that affects how you feel about yourself?
It was certainly a very quick identity shift for me, in a way, just because rocking up to one little race and standing on the start line, being a complete newbie to the sport that I was running, because it was mountain running. I'd never run up or down one before. And there was all these different elements of carrying your own gear and all sorts of things. And so even in the middle of that race, I stopped at one point and freaked out because I knew I was ahead of everyone and I didn't think I should be. And I had imposter syndrome to the max. I almost wanted to stop and call my coach just because I had my phone on me as it was mandatory gear. But then I got myself through that immediate panic and got to the finish and raced my heart out and got to the finish line. But it was all very surreal to begin with. And what that translated to, because I didn't process it very well at the start, was I started running purely to prove myself and purely to prove to everyone else that I deserved the sponsorship that I got first go, and I deserved to be treated like an elite and professional athlete, even when I had zero experience at any level and there was no transition up to it. So all my motivations became very external, and that put a lot of stress and changed the way I ran and the way I trained, which worked for a little while, but it wasn't sustainable in any way. And so what I ended up doing at one point, because I forever felt like I didn't belong at the elite level or on those start lines because I hadn't made that identity shift internally. Because in my mind, I was still just a recreational runner that should be at the back of the pack. And so at one point there, because I became known among the Australian trail and mountain running scene, and so I didn't rock up to any start lines for a while there where I wasn't pushed to the front of the field and people didn't know my name or what I should do and people didn't expect me to win. And that expectation to win really drained me a little bit for a while there, because I didn't expect myself to win, but other people did. And so what I ended up doing is I flew overseas. I flew to New Zealand and I didn't tell a single soul that I was going there. And I did a race. I did the New Zealand Mountain Running Championships. So still a very high level elite race because it needed to be, because I wanted to prove to myself that I could be there for myself. And I didn't post anything anywhere, social media. The only person that knew I was there was my coach and my parents. And I just remember standing on the start line and just asking myself the question of how much can you give in this race purely for yourself? And I ran that race with the most gratitude and also control and level of, it felt like I had a level of expertise at that point. And I won, which obviously I was very thankful for. But in doing so, I confirmed to myself that I was running for me and that I was doing it for myself, but also that I belonged where I was trying to be fit in. And I was no longer afraid of what people would say if I lost or what people would think of me having broken into the scene so quickly. So that was a major shift. And so now I'm very much more at peace with rocking up to start lines, not feeling that I need to win. All I feel is I need to give my best and I need to enjoy the process and see where that lands me, because that's the more sustainable way to actually achieve the goals I want to. And then in terms of as well, the support that you were talking about before, Trina, part of that was I didn't deal with any of that alone. I have a very supportive coach, as well as a supportive team of strength coaches. Shout out to Melbourne Uni Tony, because he's both of our strength coach, but then the medical professionals, also my psychologists. I've always regularly seen psychologists, but also the most important factor for me, which you need to stay grounded. So when change is occurring, and especially change at a big level, and you need to have that identity shift in a way in order to deal with it and feel that you belong in your changed environment. I needed that grounding, and I got that from, I belong to a recreational running crew, the Crosby crew, who's part of, my coach obviously coaches it and runs it. And that's a 400 strong crew where when I rock up to training, there might be anywhere from 20 to 100 other people there. And I've never been treated differently. No matter what I've achieved or how I run, no one expects any more of me than they're going to give on the day in that training session. And I'm not a special person or runner or anything. I'm just Simone the human. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, because it's kept me very grounded and value driven in what I do, and kept the element of it's fun and I'm more than a runner, and I will always be more than a runner. So that grounding in dealing with change is incredibly powerful. And then
the thing around, we've had this conversation before about our support teams, and that the most important thing is that they love you for you as a whole person rather than you as the athlete.
For sure.
Yeah. You have the permission to love yourself whether you win or lose.
Yeah, it's incredible how, like, as soon as you get tied up in that the outcome is your worth, that's not a sustainable way of achieving anything in life, really, because the outcome is not guaranteed in any way, but the process there and the support you have, it certainly is. So then to move into, I suppose, where we are today and what we deal with today and the way we train and live today, there's a lot of things we have to deal with on the day-to-day basis. And I know both of us are on a very much a learning journey as to how to deal with that, as we're both currently slightly injured and having to deal with the fact that we have to like take breaks at times and it's not all in our control. So Trina,
I have a device on my ankle right now. We're sitting here, yeah.
Yeah, look, but for the day-to-day, like your ankle at the moment, Trina, like how do you deal with that now, of having to get out of your routine and having to actually change things, but also change things today so that you don't have to change your goal?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, so for context, I fell up some stairs and sprained my ankle a week ago. And so I've had to modify my training this week. And so basically my approach to sort of training and dealing with injuries is having this really long-term perspective. Like, we're thinking that my goal is that Olympic Games in 12 months time, or even thinking about Paris in 2024. And so when I do things, I think about them in service of my goals. So if I go to training, a huge motivator for me to really push myself is to think about how this training session is going to help me in the long run. And then also thinking about, having that self-compassion as well, and understanding that being kind to my body and being able to nurture my body and not punishing myself is a very sustainable long-term, it's the only real sustainable way to be an athlete in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think comes from that that comes from that identity shift that we go through, where we stop doing things for the external, or we start to become comfortable in the environment that we're in, and it allows us to have the courage to actually make those daily changes.
And that's not to say that I didn't cry my eyes out on Monday night when I had a really sore ankle. It's like I'm still feeling those emotions. It's still terrible. I'm not denying any of that sort of stuff, but it's still having that, having that long-term view and that self-compassion.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's it's bad, but the acceptance, and that's where it's almost where the title of this came from, of the relinquishing control. It's like things happen, and it's less about pushing them away or denying the emotions that come with them, be they positive or negative, and learning to accept them as part of the journey wherever you're heading in life and whatever you're trying to do. And accepting that we are all capable of change and life is capable of changing, which is actually an incredibly comforting thing to know.
So when you're on the start line of a race, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, start lines are always fun. So competition, I suppose some of the difficult things to go with competition is you're not in your routine, you're away from all your support, and it's almost like you've spent anywhere from 12 weeks to 4 years sometimes trying to get to that start line, trying to get to that one place. And you can very easily convince yourself that what goes on between the start and the finish line will forever be more important than what goes on to actually get to the start line. And any thinking like that is in the end just going to get in your own way. So for me, when I'm on a start line, the biggest thing that I do is actually distract myself from what the circumstances of where I'm at, because in my mind, I've put all the mental energy, put all the concentration in, all the pain in during training, so that as soon as that gun goes and I'm off on the start and I'm off in the race, I just need to get out of my own way and let my body do what I've trained it to do. So I'm actually singing to myself. I play games in the middle of races, which Trina doesn't have the ability to do really with a shorter race. But my races are sometimes go for 6 hours, anywhere from 30 minutes to 6 hours kind of thing. So I have time to both get in my own way and let my body do its thing. So I always try and just not think too much. But I also have little strategies, like the little reminders. I'll write acronyms on my hands and that sort of thing, so that if I do really need to think about what I'm doing in the moment, or if my brain will only stick to running and not, playing my little games and that sort of thing of chasing people down. I play Pac-Man in the middle of races and all those sorts of fun things. But sometimes I might write roll on my on my hand, and that'll be an acronym, and so it might mean rhythm and all those sorts of things, that all I'll think is that one word. And that calms me down. So any of those little strategies, when you're in any high pressure environment, I find that calm you or give you one little thing to focus on, whether that be your breath, whether that be, for me, it's the rhythm of my running. It might be the cadence of my steps. It might be, I know I've spoken to Trina before and you said yours is just the word go, which works very well when trying to sprint very fast. So it's for me, that whole idea of, what you need to do. You've trained to do what you need to do. It's definitely what I tell myself on the start line. And then the last thing I say before the gun goes is pretty much get out of your own way. Go do it.
And I think
we've got about 5 minutes, just to let you know. And happy to take any questions if anyone would like to put them in the chat as well.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Simone, I think also something else that you're saying in that is that you've had practice. You've had endless practice in being in these really uncomfortable race situations, and so you're comfortable in being in that very uncomfortable position. You can prepare as much as you want in training, but there's nothing that compares to just racing over and over and over again. And I think that's really applicable to a lot of high pressure situations where it's just like, you just got to fail. You just got to have a bad race. You got to have a ton of bad races.
Pretty much.
That's the way to prepare. Yeah.
Nothing like those humbling.
Yeah.
Nothing like those humbling experiences to, ground yourself even more and also make you want it more. And I think both of us also have that blessing of coming from where we've come from and being in very dark places in life. No race is ever going to hurt as much as that. No race is ever going to be as hard or as uncomfortable. So it's almost like putting the actuality of what you're about to do in that moment in the context of your whole life. Because as we were saying before, it's like although all your circumstances may change, none of what you achieve, none of what you're about to do is going to fundamentally change who you are. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind, so you don't both underplay things and overplay things when
I think that's a great way to wrap up our session. Is all about this idea of being process focused rather than outcome focused. And something that I really work hard with my sports psychologist on is thinking of myself as a great girlfriend, a great friend, a great dog parent, and that those things won't change whether I win a race or I don't. Like whether I win a gold medal or I come last and I don't make the finals, like it's not going to change my personal values, my pursuit of excellence, my ambitions, and all of that.
Yeah. By the way, there's totally supposed to be pictures of us here, and technical issues. But
contacts, like the one that at Catriona Bisset at the Flying Brick, they're our Instagram if you want to get in contact with us. very happy to answer any questions there.
Hang on. Do we have, and I think we might have 2 minutes. Do we have anything we can answer now?
We've got one message. Thank you for such an inspiring message of resilience, focus, and determination. One person asked, do you use visualization?
Oh, yes, 100%. I know I do. So I actually don't use visualization during races, but in the lead up to any event, any major event, one thing I will add there is I always make sure, which I learned this obviously from a lot of different psychologists and practice over the time, of spending more time visualizing the best outcome and the outcomes I want, but also visualizing things going wrong and you dealing with it very well, or you dealing with it in the moment of everything's falling apart around you, and how do you stay strong in that moment and still keep giving your all, or keep pushing, like envision falling over in a race and do something going wrong, but then keeping going anyway. Just because if you're always envisioning the best case scenario and then something goes wrong early in a race or early in whatever you're working towards, if you haven't already visualized dealing with problems, then you can find yourself very overwhelmed. I know that from experience of freaking out as soon as things go wrong when I haven't done that. So
that's it. And I don't really use visualization. It's not something that I've looked into, but definitely something I've been thinking about. But yeah, that's it.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time. This was a very meaningful presentation. There's been some comments in the chat if you'd like to read them, just thanking you for your presentation. But this concludes today's session, and we hope you can join us for future sessions throughout the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.